bit.
I remember. Love last.
There'll be more for that to come, so you can...
So,
The Nightfold. So, you're in Preludes. Is you can...
so, homie here's got, so yeah, the art direction on Soulframe is really nice. That's the saving grace so far with this. It's got really cool designs, seems to be a very imaginative world, but I think there is quite a worry on how the gameplay is going to be. There's some stuff with Warframe that you can get away with because of its speed, and it's had 10 years of polish, but this game, oh boy, the combat was so bad. And I was thinking that before I heard other people start talking about it. I'm glad I wasn't the only one, because this sequence here is terrible. Again, these effects are kind of cool and stuff like that, but this is like, everyone's talking about how the sword misses or whatever. Like, that's whatever. I'm actually like, I don't care as much about that. Is the fact that a symptom of it missing, like it missing, is a symptom of the greater problem with this backstab, and is that it looks weak as hell. This is the weakest looking backstab I've just about ever seen. This backstab looks terrible. You know what? Let me do something here. Okay. All right. I want to try this again. Okay. So the art direction in Soulframe is looking beautiful so far. The stuff they talked about, the inspirations, the Princess Mononoke influences. It sounds really interesting. It sounds like a very different sort of world from a lot of what we've seen and gotten to play in games. So I'm very curious to where they'll go with it. But I'm noticing rough stuff about the animation. Like, even right here. Okay. People are kind of pointing out the same things over and over. Like, oh, the backstab missed. And the slide. Like, those things. Like, yeah, they're there. But it's like, if you're watching, you notice stuff even before then. There's weird little things. That's janky. The way those legs are moving is really strange. The kind of skipping around. That's clearly like some kind of conflict with the elevation on the ground is causing like the legs to get kind of confused, like stepping forward too quickly. Just really awkward animations there. Now this is this is a decent animation, but that's because it's slowed down quite a bit. It's not mid-combat. Also, they're not really moving the camera around, so you're not getting too analytical of a look at it. Like, I would have liked to have seen that from profile, from the side. That would have been a much better angle to watch that from. This little setup where they can choose, like, the UI and stuff looks great. Like, it's beautiful looking. I'll absolutely give them that, but it looks potentially confusing right now. Like, okay, just like random circles floating on top of my guy that lead to whatever upgrades. Like, okay, that's fine. Yeah, and UI stuff I feel like can change pretty easily, and a lot of this stuff can get more polished, but this fight coming up, this little attack, this stealth approach is interesting. People complain about how the sword looks like it misses in this attack coming up, but that miss is symptomatic from just what's just the problem. That's like the weakest looking back attack I've ever seen. I mean, because I'm used to like singing. Yeah, just a little poke. Pretty unimpressive backstab. And what I don't hear people talking about, like people love talking about this slide, the dodge roll. So the dodge roll around the tree, clearly that was a bad choice because there was some kind of like collision detection going wrong there. And that makes it to like, that's where this like slingshot slide effect is kind of coming from, is like the character pushing against kind of an invisible wall, like a little bit that's there. So they just kind of end up getting flopped out. And the camera is fighting with it as well. The camera's fighting that tree. So that screen tearing, that weird. See, what? It's like the camera is getting super confused there. Like it looks like screen tearing, but what's actually happening, it's like zooming in as if there's an invisible wall preventing it from the direction it needs to move, which I guess is just the tree. The camera's conflicting with the tree. The person's conflicting with the tree. They should not have let that tree be right there. They really should have tested this just a little more and removed that fucking tree. That would have solved their problem here. They wouldn't have had this weird slide, zoomy screen tear, and then this knockdown execution into like, there are so many collision detection issues here in like 2 seconds of animation between that tree. And then here you have like these interesting like pustule things growing off this building, but you can just like clip right through it. So your enemy falls into it. We can't even see them here. This execution animation is just completely obscured. So we're left kind of wondering like, oh, is that like a downward he's using the shield, and then also whoever's playing needs to be kind of scolded because they're choosing bad moments to move the camera. I mean, if all the animation's bad, maybe there's not a good movement time to move the camera, but we would have liked to have seen the end of that finishing move. Maybe the decision was to move the camera so since so much of the animation was already covered by the pustules, like, oh, let's just move the camera so we're not still looking at it. If this was played live, I guess I kind of understand, but I don't think they should have played it live. And if this is pre-recorded, they really should have edited it better or done some more attempts that didn't have that jank. And if this is the best attempt they had, then ay. This game needs to cook for a while. But the shield slams, real slidey, weird motion. There's not enough of the whole body moves. There's a little too much. So a problem with this, when you're attacking, there's this slight kind of stiffness. You're only kind of instead of like really moving in a more like organic sort of way that you might see in combat. Because like in Bloodborne, I wouldn't even call those animations. The animations in Bloodborne are actually pretty fucking anime if you really look at it. Like there's this kind of swiftness and a certain liberty with reality that's taken that makes this stuff nice and palpable and feels good and chunky. But you know, collision detection's pretty good in those games. So, but this stuff's cute. The animals look great in the game. But this Nimrod fight's terrible. Like for one, it just seems like kind of a boring fight. Like, that was pretty cool. That looked decent. Some of the glowing effects are a little questionable. That's not bad. The camera's a little awkward. The glows are a little too much. I feel like I'm having trouble looking at some stuff. Something weird happened there for a second. For a frame. I want to kind of go back and look at that. Was that because he was rolling past some rocks and it caused the camera to get confused? No, it was before that. Let's see. And Yeah, I think so. I think those nearby rocks were confusing it a little bit. I do like how that shield bounces off and lands and then comes back to you. That does look good. That camera needs to be able to move higher. It is way too close to the character, honestly. This camera is way too close to the character. Oh, it was the kick up. The kick up's pretty awkward. The zoom, 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 zoom. Like that's what the camera keeps doing because like the collision detection is like it just keeps hitting invisible walls. The camera's hitting these rocks and stuff. See, there's a little like there's such an independence of the arm from the rest of the body. Like it does feel kind of awkward. And that stuff wasn't as bad. Okay, the fight continues here. There's something very repetitive with this. Actually, like seeing this character, like, oh, you really don't have many options. Like, what? Okay, you got the shield slam, your melee. Are there medium and heavy swings? I haven't even been able to tell that yet. Um, oh, this mechanic's cool. This reminds me of like World of Warcraft a little bit. But wouldn't it be nice in that if you could always fly? Sometimes you have to hoof it by foot as a ghost, and that always sucked. But this seems neat. That seems like fun. Um, now, what else was Homie talking about?
See them do a double jump and fire off a bow attack from midair. Now, after landing, all of a sudden the camera is just right up on the player, like allowing for barely any awareness of the surroundings. To the point where the player then gets struck by this lightning attack that they couldn't see in time because that camera was so close. What I don't know here, though, is if this camera distance was actually moved by the player, the person controlling the character, to try to like highlight the boss animations for the showcase, which is entirely possible, or if this camera closeness was automated by the game when the player target locked onto the boss. If it is the latter, that is no good. It is way too close and they need to pull this thing back a bit because you can't not see like your surroundings and get struck by lightning because of it. That's not great, especially if most of the time you can be a bit further back. Also, during parts of this sequence and following encounters with the boss, it's just hard to make out what's even happening. Now that is partially because the camera is so close, but then also you've got things like the fog, the haze, the lighting effects.
The lighting
lens
effects
flare
are
from attacks.
honestly okay. These little lens flares in this fight. So, okay. Yeah, the lens flares. Honestly, the lens flares and stuff are way overkill. Like, it's hard to follow what's happening. The lightning, like, how much things are just getting lit up. This camera zooming is insane. Whether that was done manually or just the game being janky, that's just no good.
From both the boss and the player that just really clutter up the whole thing. Certainly this video's bitrate doesn't help much either. That's a bit of a mess. It's like the bitrate and the compression and processing that happened on YouTube. I don't know. This thing is like a blurry mess across the board. That doesn't help, but really the lack of visual clarity and the visual clutter is mostly due to the stuff that's baked into the game. And I think this is another major sticking point.
Oh, man. Like, jeez, those lens flares are insane. Like, it's so excessive. Like, the fog and all that stuff, it's so cluttery, you really can't see shit.
People, I mean, again, I look at crossfires off the dice, particularly the player making attacks, the blocking, the shield slam. Like, yes, it could use a little more oomph. There's a kind of lightness to it all. We could get a more sense of weight would be nice. And I do think there was definitely some alignment issues, but this portion of the gameplay, a lot of those basic fundamentals of combat seems decent enough. Again, I really think the biggest issues and where a lot of these complaints are stemming from animation looked good, but once they went into a sprint, it's like it was a robot all of a sudden, and that backstab animation completely whiffing, and there was a few others in there, like the same an appearance of the environment, like the player character and the NPCs. For me, a lot of the stuff, they've just knocked it out of the park. Like, so much about what they've shown of Soulframe is right up my alley. Soulframe is the case where playing it feels great. It's clunkiness to that game and just does not feel smooth at all. It's not very enjoyable compared to other iterations of tab targeting that I've played. So maybe Soulframe is the case where playing it feels great. It's not looking so great on these early gameplay showcases. That is certainly a possibility. I think another thing to consider here is that it is still very early days for Soulframe. The game has, after all, only been in
Honestly, seeing the ranged combat was a little wild. It's like, didn't they say they weren't going to do that? And yeah, that looks like sometimes some of the smoothest stuff. Like that, attacking with a bow and then shooting. I appreciate the kind of spell bending stuff. That seems pretty cool. I just hope they can make it a lot better soon. I would sure like to give it a try, but maybe not in the current state that it's in.